And so may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Moving forward. That's the concept that the Japanese planning team has chosen as a focus for the Tokyo Olympics. It feels very familiar in the world in which we live, and the Olympic Committee chose this concept, saying that it is representative as the world we live in begins to think about recovering from COVID-19. The committee believes that hosting these games will create hope. And it's a weird kind of hope, mixed with a whole lot of dread as the city of Tokyo finds itself in a state of emergency and the games proceed in so many strange ways. The pressure of getting to the Olympic stage is always a monumental task, but disrupted training, isolation, changes in ritual and routine, and the lack of community support, simply because people have not been able to be present at the games or in the lead up to them, have taken a huge toll on the mental, spiritual, and physical health of the athletes and of the community that has been working so hard to pull this event together. The games themselves have adopted a theme of united by emotion. And this is something that I think we can all identify with as we have moved through this global pandemic. We have been, we continue to be united by emotion. It's been called the first no-fun Olympics. Athletes have been asked to eat alone, to maintain distance in the dining hall at the Olympic Village in Tokyo, and to compete in empty stadiums. The Olympic Athletes Village will have a very different atmosphere this year from previous games, and even chaplains looking after the athletes' spiritual health have largely gone virtual except in extraordinary circumstances. Friends and family appear virtually on screens that athletes can visit after their competition, but this cannot possibly replace being embraced in moments of celebration, being embraced in moments of deep grief in the moment by teammates, loved ones, and even a stadium of onlookers who erupt in noise and celebration when great victories are made, when accomplishments, huge accomplishments happen, and who fall silent in sympathy, in compassion, in despair when tragedy happens at the Olympic Games, or simply to remember the deep emotion that comes from not living up to your own expectations. The Olympics are a bit of a strange thing. When else do we see such a gathering of the world community? When else does such a huge audience tune in to watch sports that they've never really paid any attention to before, with athletes who are virtually unknown to them prior to joining their nation's team? And yet if we simplify things, if we look beyond the spectacle, we can make some pretty interesting connections to the life of faith. The Olympics seek to engage and inspire a community while overcoming the challenge of quickly and simply communicating at times difficult information. And they do this using some familiar ideals like community building, sharing stories, educating people, and emotional connection. Community, stories, teaching, emotional connection. It seems a little bit like the life of Jesus and the ministry of Jesus. The world is gathering around the Olympics, marveling at the determination, preparation, and exhilaration of the athletes, which is not so different from trying to live a Christian life. It might be kind of fun to think of the letters of the Bible, the epistles, like those to the city of Corinth and to the Ephesians in the churches there, as notes from coaches or as training manuals. Take our reading from Ephesians this morning. It's filled with good advice on how to fuel our determination to live lives of kindness and justice centered in Jesus Christ. Don't live a life built on pretense. Be honest. Don't allow anger to be destructive, and don't let anger carry over from one day to the next. Be careful of the words that you use. Don't cause God grief. Imitate God. Keep company with God and live a life filled with love. That's a pretty good training regimen for Christians, and it is nourished and made possible by Jesus Christ, who promises to meet our hungers. What is it that you hunger for? I hope it looks a little bit more like the life described in Ephesians than anything else. Too often we hunger for gold, bronze, and silver. We hunger to outperform. We hunger to beat all of the competition. Do you hunger to beat the best or to be your best? Do you hunger for justice and love? In the Gospel of John, Jesus names himself the bread of life, and the hunger that he fills is not ever something that we can gain by winning a race or testing an opponent. The hunger he fills is not something we gain by being on top or by outstripping others. The hungers that we feel as human beings will always be there, but it can never be satisfied by status or stuff or ranking. The hunger will only be satisfied when we keep the bread of life at the center of our decisions, at the center of our actions, at the center of our thoughts. The hunger will only be satisfied when we follow St. Paul's training module, when we listen to the coaches that we discover along the way, and we find inspiration and sustainment in the bread of life. In these ways, we will move forward. In these ways, we will find hope. In these ways, we will find community that can be loving and just, and we will be members of one another. We will share stories, teach the faith to new generations, and remain emotionally connected to one another, to all of creation, and most importantly, to the bread of life. Thanks be to God. Amen.